Who do you think Arnold is?
Well, I've got a theory. Could be Bernard, a robot Bernard. No, something isn't right there. I've got a theory. Could be Dolores. He hid himself inside a massive robot mind. Yes, I've got a theory. We should podcast fast. Every week, a new hot take. We cannot take them back.
The place with the hottest of takes. You found it. You found it. You got to the end of the maze. You found the door. Your DNA has been spliced up. Welcome to Westworld Theories. I am Jim Scampoli.
I'm Jacob Burrows, and it doesn't look like anything to me because I'm on the podcast feed, so I'm just getting the audio. But hey, if you go to youtube.com/showswhatyouknow, it will look like something to you because you'll get to see our faces too. Either way, we're here to talk about Westworld Episode 2.
Of Season 2, titled Reunion. So we're still settling in. We're still... I don't know how to say... I feel like we're just covering old ground here, personally. I understand it's because they're, retconning what the show is, because now it's Facebook. Last year it was video games, and it was video games and storytelling last year, basically, with the park and all that. But now we're getting into ripped from the headlines. Westworld is just all about data mining and taking your DNA to clearly make a host clone of you and clear out your bank account or set nukes off or something or other. What say you, Jacob?
Yeah, no, I was going to ask, and you already answered my question of how do you feel compared to last week. You're right. I think I definitely get the same vibe of okay, it's about data and all this stuff, which they're hammering home fairly hard. There's still some questions in my mind as far as this thing they show, the thing that William shows Dolores, the big thing, and I have no idea what it is. But he's showing it as that's the weapon or whatever. Do you know what I'm talking about?
I mean, I know they mention it's a weapon, but what does he show her?
Well, I'm trying to find the exact. I'll send you a link to an image of what I'm talking about. I think, but it's this huge mechanical thing that he showed. Okay, I'm gonna link you. This is getting us nowhere.
I mean, I know what you're talking about. I know you're talking. I know that's the thing. It's this is the park. The park's a weapon. We're getting people's DNAs. We know people's secrets. We're jumping around in time.
Yeah, but literally, what is this thing? What is it? Because I can't describe it because I was looking at it it's like a half bridge that's collapsed in the middle, or like a mining shaft. Maybe they're digging up the underground, and that's what it is.
Yes, yeah, okay, I know. Okay, yeah, I know what you're talking about. Where it basically looks like they were building that ocean that we saw in the end of the last episode. I saw it also as well as just in general, building the park.
Yeah.
But yeah, I guess I see what you're saying. I didn't take that as the weapon. And I mean, I guess obviously with this show, everything's very mysterious and people talk in riddles and analogies. So we'll see. But yeah, all right. I'm sorry. I didn't know exactly what you're talking about. Basically, what we're talking about is that kind of when it shows the construction going on of what could potentially be that valley that becomes like an ocean. But the other side of that is that could also just be we're building the park.
Yeah.
Yeah. I know, either way.
It could be digging up the underground for some sort of secret Delos base or just the underground base of Westworld. I thought I connected it to the weapon just because Dolores says to Teddy, kind of right after this flashback, that an old friend was foolish enough to show me. And on the surface, it seems like she's talking about William as the old friend, but it might, of course, be Bernard because the episode starts with Bernard showing his whole home and these weird symbols that they linger on a lot in his, the building blocks. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yes, but now breakthrough, that's the weapon.
That's what I was... Yeah, I was going to say, maybe. He also does say that he's building it so that he can have his family closer to the park. Now, I don't know where his family was originally, but we don't know where Westworld is, except people speak Chinese there. But hey, that could be anywhere. Just give it 5 years, am I right? So it's just, that's almost what I feel like. They're trying to make us think it's William, but actually it's Bernard from the beginning of the episode, because his house, Westworld's not going to show you like Arnold's old house and then never do anything with it, right?
Yeah, no, I think you're right. It's a wolf in sheep's clothing, if you will. Because yeah, it is, now that you think about it in that context, it's like, why are we spending this amount of time to show Bernard's home where his kids can die? I will say, like, that stuff is really interesting to me. Like, Dolores, obviously very interesting to me. Bernard, very interesting to me. But when we start getting into like seeing Logan again, and like, I mean, it's nice that we see the Papa Delos, but it's, we already know. We know that they invest in the park. We know that, like, when Logan has to go into the meeting, we know they're all hosts because we've seen season 1. And don't get me wrong, like, I guess it's still like a nice scene and I get why it's there, but I just feel like it's very familiar territory. And while like a robot uprising is going on, I don't need to see the investment pitch,
Okay. Yeah, that's fair, but the reason it's a bit titillating to me is that we've never ever seen it outside the park, and it does sort of broaden it up because, of course, the revolution doesn't stop at the edge of the park, so we're going to be heading out here, and it's interesting to know what sort of level the people outside the park are at. I mean, I'm still, one of these weeks, bang, zap, straight to the moon, Jim. Westworld's on the moon. I'm still on that tip, but generally speaking, it's like we're getting a feel that the world of technology is not very far in the future at all, based on this, at least in the flashbacks.
Well, but that's also part of the thing, because the thing is, I completely agree with you. We've been wondering about the outside world this whole time, so seeing Bernard and Dolores in the quote real world, I loved all that. But it's just some of the other stuff, because it also tells me we're seeing these familiar faces, and this is what, 30 years ago, 35 years ago. We haven't had upgrades, like they were already kind of there at Westworld, and then things would just kind of moseyed on along for the next 30 years. I mean, I guess they're hinting at they didn't put more R&D into the hosts per se. They put it into gathering secrets and gathering DNA. But I don't know. I remember, I mean, I guess the flashbacks in season 1 were even before this, when they had kind of the rickety hosts. So it's just tough when we keep jumping around through time. And I get that's kind of the point, is since we have these cyborgs, they could be in any time frame and they look the same. But it's like, my iPhone doesn't look the same from 2 years ago. So like, we're sticking around with the same molds and everything like that. It's just when we get too deep into some of that stuff, it starts to break it a little bit for me, just because, I mean, I guess partially because of frustration, because it feels like we're covering the same ground. And partially, I just don't feel like we're getting anything new. Besides, don't get me wrong, like I said, I love the Bernard and Dolores stuff, and seeing Dolores through all these different times, because she is the oldest host, and how now all this stuff that you thought was deleted is informing her in the future present that we're in. But anyway, it's nitpicky stuff. I'm not saying the show's bad. I'm just like anxious to get to things, and I got to settle into Westworld, where Westworld's going to play around with you for a little bit till we start to get to things.
Yeah, that's fair. I mean, don't get me wrong, I'm not super excited to see Logan. I mean, we might see old Logan, and there would sorry, what was that?
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. But yeah, I was waiting for like the reveal, when they have a reveal with one of the Despocitos or whatever he was.
Yeah.
I was like, oh, it's old Logan.
Desperados, maybe? I don't know. Yeah, no, I don't really care about that, although it does, that stuff did give me a bit more meat on the bones as far as caring about William in the present, because, like, the last episode, my take on him was like, I'm an old bored fuck and I just want to fight to the death. And now we've seen how he set all of this up, and in the present he's saying that it was his biggest mistake and he wants to set it right. And I don't know if right in his mind is going to be right in our mind or whatever. But it's interesting because Arnold, no, not Arnold, Robert went through the same thing of like he was against what Arnold was doing, and then at the end he went out exactly the same way, propping up the robot uprising. And this does give us a bit more dimensionality on William, who last season it was a gimmick that we had the past and the present, and now, at least in this episode, I felt that they sort of reflected and informed one another, these time streams.
I completely agree with that. Everything you're saying is absolutely right. I think I'm just being too anxious because I'm like, no, tell me what's going on, Westworld, please. And it's like, that's not Westworld. I need to settle in. I need to get used to it. I need to be like boning up on my Greek mythology.
Yeah.
Because what they mentioned that Westworld Company was initially was the Argos Initiative, which of course is the Greek island in the ship that carried Jason and the Argonauts. And Delos is also a Greek island and a birthplace of the twins, Apollo and Artemis. Of course, they were literally children of the gods Zeus and Leto.
Yeah, right. No, of course. We all know that. Yes, well, since we established that the first scene is probably going to be important later, let's go through a bit of details on it when Dolores and Arnold are hanging out. I mean, first of all, she's looking out at the city and is amazed, while Arnold says, after a while, it doesn't look like anything at all, sort of mirroring the famous line of doesn't look like anything. And it's interesting because I think we've all thought this sometimes, that like when you look at your iPhone and you're like, what the fuck? This is crazy that this can do this? But we forget. It's all totally ordinary to us, everything. And that's sort of what Arnold is talking about there.
Yes, and I like the way it plays out because then it's just programming because she repeats it again, and then you're like, oh yeah, this is like when I had to tell my Alexa to turn my kitchen lights on twice because the stupid robot doesn't get it the first time. And it kind of like, I mean, it's what he was talking about because of the meeting, and maybe some of her improv programming isn't quite there, and I don't know. I just like that moment because it feels so genuine at first. And then when it just repeats again, it's like, oh, yeah, you're programmed to think this is so cool, but you're just a dumb robot.
Yeah. And that's the thing he has to come face to face with, because I believe the whole thing that he realized was, no, she needs time to grow this whole real personality, and it can't just happen like that. We also get an Anthony Hopkins impersonator in the reflection, who's like, oh, Arnold, what are you doing? There was a time I thought this was charming, and all that, so that's good. But then they head off to show Dolores Arnold's home that he's building, and he says some stuff about how she has something quite a lot in common with his son. Clearly, his son is not dead yet. He's not gone off the deep end. And he says, you both see it so clearly, the beauty of it, the possibility of it. So many people have stopped seeing it at all. And at the end of the scene, she asks if he will bring her back. She'd like to see it again. And he says, of course, I promise. Which feels like, that I like the writing in this scene in general. It's like you said, when she repeats it, it's like, oh, this felt so important, and yet it wasn't. But still, when he promises to bring her back, she's not going to remember this, but he's sort of hatching the plan of getting her out into the real world and all that stuff at the same time. And we have the important symbols that will definitely be important later.
Yeah, and then also the question as well is, so I mean, Arnold's son died, and I had to pull it up real quick. People are saying it was due to cancer, but then I guess, is that really what happened? Or because we know that hosts are built with their like trauma, like it's an important part of their like character.
Mm-hmm.
So I mean, how much do we know of what is real with Arnold? It's obviously purposely vague, or do we just kind of take that at face value?
I think I've lost track of all, the talks we had with Arnold last season, because some of them were in the past and some of them were with Bernard, who could have had implanted memories. And then even in the past, Arnold was going crazy anyway. So what can we trust with what he was saying? But I'm working under the assumption that he had a son who died, and it would almost I mean, I'm saying this now. You can play it back later, but it would feel redundant if it was like, and his son was a host too, or whatever. Like it would be unnecessary. What do you think?
Well, I'm just reading. I mean, it is called Westworld Theories, so we can go over some theories. Someone
Yeah.
has a theory that there's a suggestion that his son was actually a girl who grew up to be Charlotte Hale, and Ford messed up Bernard's memories to cover it up. But then Bernard's with Charlotte in these
Yeah.
episodes, so I don't think that's quite the case. But maybe his son. Well, no, because this is supposed to be actually Bernard. He does say he has a son, so he has a son. Done deal. The thing is just the death. I guess one can assume.
You mean it's supposed to be Arnold? I mean, I get it mixed up as well, but
Oh,
we're the Arnold, and he does say he has a son, so it's got to be a son.
Yes. Or his son is someone we have yet to meet and he is alive. But we'll see. It's Westworld Theories.
Yeah, it's Logan. Logan is his son for no reason. Yeah, I mean, that sort of thing, I get that, as I said, I'm like, oh, but why would they do that? But that's what I said last season about everything that then turned out to be true. So, I mean, his son, there's probably going to be something more there. I don't really feel any of those breadcrumbs yet. And it does make perfect sense to me if his son dies, that leads him to get more and more into the park and doing his crazy experiment and eventually killing himself.
Very true. Very true. Although he does already say that he lives at the park, even with his family.
Mm-hmm.
So,
well, his wife says that.
Exactly. Yes. And wives tell the truth.
Yes.
But yeah, so either way, Bernard Arnold is very complicated and messed up character. We don't know what to believe, and hopefully the truth will reveal itself.
So the symbol that's all over there is basically a plus sign with 4 dots around it, and it is a sign often found on Greek vases from around 700 BC. It is used in certain types of cartography as a sign indicating stone bottom at the water's edge. Whatever that means, but there's a lot of water motif going on in this season so far.
Because Westworld's underwater.
Right. In 17th century alchemy or chemistry, I guess alchemy and chemistry was kind of the same thing at that point. It represented distilled vinegar. Okay. Or something else. I don't think this is important.
Well, hey, what's thicker, blood or water or vinegar? Isn't that the same? Blood's thicker than vinegar? That's the saying, right?
But it's all often anyway used as a sign of water. And there's actually a shot someone pulled up of like first season of just someone in Westworld carrying a jug of water, it looks like. I'm not sure if that's what it is. And it has that symbol, except it's tilted on the sign. So it's kind of like an X with dots around it. So there's that.
Was that farm boy that got murdered last week? Was he carrying water? I don't remember.
I don't know. I can pull it up. But
what if he was Bernard's son, Arnold's?
Could be.
Sorry.
It's all right.
Sorry. Back on track.
That's what we're no. We want to go off track as much as possible. It's the whole concept of this show, Jim. But anyway, that is the whole extent. Like we've got to the intro just now. We're at the intro, so the intro plays, and then we're back in the present, or it's not even the present because it's like when the park is getting fucked up. So it's like 2 weeks ago, and I say this with air quotes. I think that's what they said last week, but of course it could be any period of time.
12 days, 11 or 12 days beforehand, before like basically present day to us is Bernard walking around with the like Delos people and finding all the hosts drowned in the water. Like we don't see any of that time frame in this episode, correct?
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask as well. I think you're right. So instead we see Dolores following on last week when they found something, Dolores breaking into basically the lab with Teddy to show him all the sights and sort of prove what's going on. And there's people there still working because they don't even know things are fucked up yet. But Dolores comes in and lets them know how fucked up it all is. And Teddy as well needs to figure this out. And, the question, like, ask him why was so great because we already knew the answers in our heads, I think, of it's just for fun. But it's still great when he, like, delivers that and Teddy looks like, what the fuck is going on here?
Yeah. I do like this. I like this scene, and it's kind of like I like Dolores looking at dead hosts, and it's like, oh, we can just bring all these things back and use them to our advantage.
Yeah.
And then, of course, when they start playing the piano Kanye cover, I love the idea too that we might have even talked about this, but like since it is in the future, so like Ford was a big Kanye fan
Yeah, he
because
grew up
he's an
with
old
Kanye.
man. But like that's why it's like, oh, remember this classic Kanye song? Oh man, I'd love to play that in the park.
I could just imagine Ford having a Twitter that's very similar to Kanye, just tweeting his weird things about humanity and evolution and everything, and everyone's just loving it.
And I think there was a lot of question. I mean, it was answered relatively soon. I mean, we knew that this actor was back, but I think at the end of last season, we did kind of think like, oh, okay, maybe we're done with young William. We're done with this now, but clearly we're not.
Yeah. No, clearly not. And I even feel like after this episode, like, are we done with young William now? But I feel like we're gonna get some more of that.
I mean, we're done with him until we think we're done with him, and then we find a host that's young William,
Yep.
and he starts talking to the man in black, giving him, all different types of mysterious answers.
Yeah, no, that will happen in this. Like, don't even worry about it. It will happen.
Well, and it'll be one of those things where we're gonna see a young character and think it's a flashback, but then
Yeah.
they're a host and it's present day or it's the fucking future.
This
I didn't need to
show,
say
man.
that word there. I apologize.
This show is so perfect, man. They can do anything, and we're just gonna be like, mind blown. Speaking of William, we see him in the future now, heading up to save his old pal, who's hanging upside down by a tree, getting eaten up by ants, and he shoots these three brothers. But still, one of them's kind of still alive though, so he has to do a little do a little exercise there for those old bones. And then they head off to a saloon, get some whiskey, and he knocks something out of a wall that's presumably planted there by his whole Delos connection thing. And I don't think we find out what that is, do we?
I assumed it was just like a first aid kit.
Yeah. Because he does. He like closes up his wound with like a sonic screwdriver thing, right?
That's why he says like it's cheating, like because he's like, "What is that?" He's like, "It's cheating," but circumstances. He has some line like that, and then he's pulling like some buckshot out of his arm or whatever, and kind of sewing himself up like a badass. And I do like the idea that like all this shit's going down, and a lot of the hosts are just still playing out their storylines. Like they're still because I mean, what else are they going to do to that? It's not really that different to them until they get like their extra enlightenment or what have you. But yeah, and the other thing, I guess, is it due to the communication or it's just something Ford did that all of them can hurt? Because I wasn't sure if like it's only the ones in the know can hurt people or basically they can all really hurt people now.
I think all of them, and I think that I mean, yeah, the whole idea was to play for keeps for the Man in Black. It wouldn't really work if just some of them could. And I think as well, they do mention, well, when they're heading into that town, Pariah, and the Man in Black, why do I keep calling William says, William.
I think we should still call him the Man in Black because that's how I always put him in the notes still, even though we know it's William. But like, it's almost like when we say William, we're talking about young William, and Man in Black is,
That's true. That's true. So he does say something like, okay, like the town's got even more to hell because it's off the rails now. Like they're still playing out their narratives, but there's no one there to reset them. So when they reach the climax of their narrative, they're not going to get reset. They're just going to keep going, and it's going to go off the rails, much like we like to do in this podcast. So yes. And he talks to his friend. I don't remember his friend's name, but this guy he's been hanging out with in the past as well. This is a revolutionary, and he sort of convinces him to go along with this, his real revolution. Like now you have a chance at a real revolution.
Oh, Lawrence, right? The guy he saves.
That's right. So they do that. He has the first aid thing. And then we get even more of, as you mentioned, Dolores has the idea of just rebooting a bunch of people to buff up her army and also tortures a guy by having this white stuff all over his face, making him point out where they're probably going to appear with reinforcements and things like that.
Yes. Now, I mean, both our characters here, between the Man in Black and Dolores, we see them throughout this episode building up an army. Now, Dolores, I get because it's like she's kind of awaiting the backup that's supposed to arrive and take out all the hosts, kind of like what we see in Bernard's time frame, like 10 days in the future or what have you. Uh, Now, the Man in Black building up an army, is that just like he's getting ready for a boss fight? Like where he's going for, he knows there'll be a lot of hosts guarding it. Is that the idea?
They
I
do
just,
mention that they
uh,
do mention he wants to go like west or whatever they say, and oh, there's so many army people there, but it does feel like it's kind of mainly to get Gus Fring in the show,
oh yeah.
right? I mean, what was your take?
Yeah, that's I just wasn't fully clear on what he needed an army for. If it was similar where he thinks people are going to try to come in and shut things down and he's not going to let that happen, or if he's just anticipating, basically a boss fight where to get to his goal.
I think, yeah. I mean, they do say about like there's a bunch of army people there, but I sort of felt like, well, yeah, that's just a host saying that. You don't know, like it is all off the rails now. So even who even knows?
Okay. And then I assume what that guy was being burnt up with when he was being tortured, is that like what they used to make like skin molds or something? I wasn't fully clear. I was just trying to guess on it.
Yeah, I mean, it's the stuff they dip the hosts in to give them that nice glaze, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, they're talking a lot about like the pearly gates and things like that. I mean, the Man in Black does talk about how there's probably no God out there, but here people are sure being watched and judged, and we're gonna reach the place of judgment, the pearly gates, and that stuff. And the Man in Black says, "Nah, it's 3 days ride due west." That was the line, and Lawrence says there's masses of Confederados out there, hundreds. So that's when it gets to like, oh, the only other way we have to go to. Oh yeah, that's when they say we need an army to break through, and then it's like, oh, we got to go to Pariah and all that.
Yeah, and then I forgot, like they do make reference to this character that Gus Fring plays was like Lawrence's character for a little while, and I do remember they kind of showed that in the first season. I mean, it's such a kick-ass Westworld scene. I mean, never mind Gus Fring showing up's kick-ass and awesome, but then when it's Ford talking through Gus Fring and like all those hosts are shooting themselves in the head because it's like, you must go it alone, Man in Black. Like,
Yes.
wow, what a cool moment.
The only thing that made it sort of confusing for me is that Lawrence says the only other route is through Pariah. So the Man in Black kind of, or someone says, we'll need an army, or we'll go through Pariah. But they go to Pariah and try to get the army of the people there. And it's like, no, you got to go alone. And I was like, well, I thought Pariah was the way where you went alone. And you just killed yourself. So that made it kind of easier anyway.
Yeah. And I mean, kind of in between some of these scenes, like we had been mentioning at the top of the episode, is we're seeing the backstory of the park. We're meeting, we see William's family and his father-in-law, who like runs the Delos company, and kind of his pitch on the park. So we get another moment. I mean, we get the moment in the party with Logan where the party all freezes and they're all hosts, and then we get the park. We see Dolores and Teddy, and the park freezes, and then William and his father-in-law are discussing it. And you see some other like business guys in the back, like there's this demo for what's going on here, and we're getting closer to what was hinted at in the first episode, where like we said, it's ripped from the headlines. It's data mining, or at least there's an element there. To what end, we're not fully clear on. I don't think it's just getting people's sex secrets. I mean, clearly there's something going on with DNA, and we saw that host clone or whatever that was like basically keeping track of memories and DNA and somehow keeping them together. I'm sure it's something to do with clones or something. What say you?
I say, well, I think specifically what they're talking about there in the park when they're sort of analyzing this business opportunity, Mr. Delos, he doesn't see the point of any of all this. He doesn't get why this would be useful. It's just helping people live out their fantasies. So that's when William dictates sort of what it could actually be. And he talks about I mean, it does make sense with his experience in the first season of when he came there, like, oh, I don't know about this. And then he went crazy basically and went into the world and, like, I'm going to live out my wildest fantasies and I actually going to fall in love with a robot and all this shit. So he's talking about getting to see what people actually want and how they behave when they don't have any limitations. And he says, if you can't see the business in that, then you're not the man I thought you were. Now, that does sound like it's just kind of like we're going to track them so we can sell better toothpaste to them. But that's clearly not the thing. Like, I mean, that's what we would do now, like just through, Facebook and so on. We track everything and the ads and the marketing, but it's not ads and marketing. That would be silly. It's got to be the DNA and that stuff. And probably like to is it simply to blackmail people? Because that doesn't seem right. Because Dolores also says that she's going to find this weapon, which is to do with this information one way or another, and she's going to use it to destroy all of it or all of them and take over. So you can't really do that with just information about how people like to have weird kinky sex.
Yeah, because it's also I mean, going to Westworld in this universe of this show, it's like if your friend says, I'm going to Thailand, you're like, should I be friends with this person? You're single and you're old and you're going to Thailand.
They got good beaches.
Yeah.
But yeah, if they're old, that does make it weird. That's suspicious. Yes, well, I guess so, but we still, I mean, we know, but we don't know, and I feel like we maybe are supposed to think we know. What do you think?
Well,
I mean, supposed to think we know?
Well, especially talking in like the vagaries of like, if you don't see the business in that, you're not a businessman. We as the audience are like, I'm a businessman. I know what he means, even though we don't know what he means.
Yeah.
We're gonna pretend we know what it means because it's like, hey, I know a thing or two about business. I don't know exactly what he means, but I mean, obviously, we're gonna see. And yes, I'm in total agreement. Like, I'm sure there's elements of that. There's definitely elements of having people's secrets and using that to a certain advantage, but that's not the main goal. There's got to be more to it. And I guess we'll find out when we see 120-year-old Delos man and how he's still alive through a host or whatever because his consciousness has been downloaded to one of those little white brains. But also how it shows how sick young William is. That he brought Dolores to the retirement party to play piano. Mm-hmm. And it's like this sick thing where he's there with his family, but also there's the robot love of his life. Like, it does show like how he's really cracking up and becomes this man that we know as the Man in Black.
Yeah, that's a good point. And yeah, it is kind of heartbreaking later towards the end. We mentioned this thing that he shows Dolores where they're excavating or building or whatever. And he says like, you really are just a thing. I can't believe I fell in love with you. Like, I'm so silly. I mean,
well, one of the interesting things though is because like now that we're seeing William involved in stuff and like building a thing, but it would never have been thought before that would be happening because everything season 1 taught us is that Ford controls everything. So I know they're probably not going to have Anthony Hopkins back. We're going to have like a young version of him. I'm really interested in what how he's playing into this because it's not like William is now William is now Ford. And I understand that they are investing in the park. And so they obviously have some more power, but the way season 1 told us is that Ford would never let them change things. But now he's like openly building a ravine or a weapon or whatever. So I'm really interested to see how that's going to play out.
Well, as they say in, I think, the previously on, they're talking about how, from last season, there's a line of how this place is one thing to Ford and the director, and there's one thing to the people working, and one thing to the guests, and completely another thing to us. So I think, as far as that, Delos, we've seen they have these little bases of operations that are not known to people like Bernard. I'm saying Bernard because, when he's there with Charlotte, and whatever, he doesn't know about that stuff. So I think that the Delos investment, I mean, the thing that William pitches is not about hey, we're going to tell great stories. They actually don't care about that, and that's what Ford cares about. So that's why he's had free reign to work on that, as long as he doesn't mess up anything as far as what Delos wants. But then last season, obviously, he was, taking charge and making a new narrative, and then the narrative, of course, is much larger than just little games he's playing. I don't think Delos really care about the storylines going on. Why else would they allow someone to be hired like the hack writer who's following along with Maeve at this point?
Oh yeah, very true. I just from the hype I bought into about Ford, I wouldn't buy that he wouldn't know about even that like secret area that they went into with
Oh,
Bernard.
yeah.
Like he has to know that stuff's going on, and I mean, obviously, to an extent, it's part of what maybe triggered him into this new narrative and what he's up to. I just when we're seeing these flashbacks and stuff, I know it's going to be kind of corny to see a young Ford, but I need to see like his reaction to some of these things happening.
Yeah, that's a good point. I also feel like he knew about all of that, and he's like a weird chess mastermind behind it all, of course. But I mean, that's also going to figure into what he's programmed into all these freaking hosts, because he is, he is the ghost in the machine now. We don't need Anthony Hopkins because we can have Gus Fring speaking as him.
Very true. Very true.
Also, he's very expensive. But yes, so speaking of Maeve and his writer boy, they do meet up, I guess out of coincidence, with Dolores as they're heading their separate ways, and they get to have a little cool back and forth of their different ideologies on what should be done. And I think you were speaking of this like last week of getting to see their different points of view and who is more right or wrong and who's going to be the real savior of the robot race. What did you think of this reunion between them?
Well, yeah, I was gonna say like Westworld is so good at this. I mean, I know like in these past two episodes and the top of this episode, I may sound fairly negative, and I apologize for that. If you're a big fan of the show, I'm not trying to do that because I can't deny like I remember last year when there was finally a Ford and Man in Black, like just interaction and sit down. It was kind of like, oh shit, oh my god, and it's similar here. And we're only in episode 2, and just a quick little meeting was it was really kick ass. It was great to see the back and forth, and yeah, really kind of help like basically layer out what these two characters are for, and it does kind of show that even though I'm still a little iffy on Maeve and on her attachment to like a fake child, it does show that she is doing her own thing in a way. Like Dolores is getting revenge, but is part of her programming. Like that's always going to be the argument with the hosts, but it does kind of single Maeve out more as like a unique thing because she's just going for her own personal journey, I guess. And then Dolores is doing kind of the cliche robot uprising.
Yes, and Dolores is, I mean, she claims obviously to be fighting for freedom and everything, but she's literally like taking control of all the other hosts one way or another. And Maeve is the only one that she's let slip out of her grasp because she actually uses that rhetoric against her like, well, you're fighting for freedom, so you have to let me go, right? But everyone else, like when she recruits her army, she kills them all and then like reboots them because they don't want to do what she wants them to. And she even says later when they're going to meet up with someone else, she's like, oh, we can just change his mind. But she means literally change his mind and go in and manipulate those things, which would be like, aren't you just as bad as them now? And I would guess she would say something cryptic about how I should be hung on a cross, and that'd be the end of that argument. But it does seem a bit like Maeve is more in the right.
Yes, and Dolores, for all her thing about basically going and getting revenge on their god, she's really playing God for sure. Like, yeah, she's killing people and bringing them back to life to show her power and basically get their, faith, for lack of a better word, and building her army that way.
Yeah, and they have that line that Maeve gets to say that revenge is just a different prayer at their altar, darling, and I'm well off my knees. So that's a good line. Yeah, good stuff. But do you think this is the reunion that the title episode? I mean, the title references. Are there any other reunions that seem apparent? I mean, we do have Dolores and past William at some point. I guess there's a few.
Yeah. I mean, we have Man in Black and Lawrence. It's quite a reunion.
So it's very true. Yeah,
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to say. It's hard to say. I mean, that's obviously a big one because we do know that for what we know with Maeve's journey, it did start with Dolores giving her the classic line and kind of setting her on this path. So
yes, and I think that's their only interaction before this
yeah,
as well. So yeah, then Dolores does go to this barn where people are eating like it's the Last Supper. You know how you always hang out and you just sit at one side of the table, right? When you're having dinner, so you're very far away from everyone, right?
yep, absolutely.
Yeah. And guns get pulled, but of course, I mean, it's fine because we've had so much buildup with Dolores, but it is kind of this thing of I'm just gonna walk into danger and not even care. And if they had some sort of plan as far as how to defeat them, it almost would have felt a bit cooler. But their plan is we're gonna shoot them super fast. They're not gonna have a chance to shoot us because we're too badass.
Yeah, no, I agree with that because I was waiting for something, yeah, like some big twist to happen of what she was going to do, even if it was just like doing the old freeze them or whatever, because she has the power to do that. But yeah, it really was. I'm going to talk tough, and then we're just going to shoot you really quick. And but meanwhile, these are like varmints, and I imagine they all have their guns on them, but they're all just a little too slow to really kind of come back and shoot one of them in time.
Yeah, which I didn't, completely buy, but I guess they've just been, they've had their stats upped by 1 million, so it's basically like playing on God mode at this point for them, I would assume. And even when they say that stakes are real, I mean stakes are not really real if you have a guy with an iPad because you could just reboot anyone, and I guess even if Dolores dies, she can get rebooted. So the stakes are kind of just real for the Man in Black and any other humans that might find their way in here.
Yeah, unless it's just a nice reveal for them to find out that they're actually a host. Everyone's a host,
Yeah,
and on we go.
yeah, absolutely. So yeah, they do the shooting and then the rebooting, the shoot and boot. We're gonna call it from now on.
Yeah,
And we get the whole flashback to the retirement party and all of that going on, and we get to see Logan again.
I mean,
for
and
some.
Logan is basically like a drug addict now.
Mhm.
I guess it's because it's William has shown him up as the true heir to the Delos family, and even though Logan is kind of the one that pushed to invest into Westworld, he didn't see it for what it was. I mean, this is all what I'm assuming because he's
Yeah.
just so sad and talking to Dolores and shooting up multiple needles.
Yeah, I mean, he did bring out the psychopath in William in season 1 when they were in the park, and and William had a little speech about how, so you're just a little cuck, aren't you? And he's like, no, no, but he was on the horse and he was like had to ride off naked, or I don't really recall, but something along those lines. And yeah, now he can't do nothing, and he does get to say something about how they've like signed their own death warrant or something like that. I don't recall the exact. Yeah, he says, "Do you know what they're celebrating up there? That, darling," he says, "is the sound of fools fiddling." I'm just watching it now to see the exact quote. While the whole fucking species starts to burn. So he at least is kind of tuned into what's going on, more or less.
Yes, yeah, because I mean, I didn't really read it that he knew what their like ultimate plan was. I just read it as he was speaking like evolutionary, where we built these things that are
Yeah.
already so advanced and they're only going to get better and eventually replace us.
Yeah, because he did say, we're not here yet at the start, where he had saw the people freezing. We're not here, and then it's like, oh, we're here, for sure. So then we have the Gus Fring scene, as it shall forever be known.
Yeah,
Which
so great. That's Ring though.
yeah, he was mainly in it apparently because Anthony Hopkins liked him in Breaking Bad, as far as what I read.
Oh, that's
Online, there's a bunch of articles about how Anthony Hopkins liked Gus Fring in Breaking Bad and wanted him to be in Westworld.
and I mean not to take anything away from Gus Fring. What's the actor's name?
Well,
It's on the tip of my tongue. I honestly, but I would almost. I was gonna say like I could almost guarantee like everything you've seen him in since has been because the people liked him as Gus Fring. Like,
that's true. That is
let's get that
totally
guy.
true.
Let's get that. Oh, Giancarlo Esposito.
Yes. It is kind of. It's honestly I mean, I liked him in it, but it is sort of distracting for me. I guess it makes sense because just like the hosts are replaceable, it's like, oh no, now this guy's here and then he's dead. It's not as bad as having Ed Sheeran in Game of Thrones or anything like that. No way. I mean, he's actually an actor, so get him in there for sure. Have him do the part. But I honestly did not see him shooting himself in the head at the end. I thought it would be more than just a little bit part, and it's only because he's in that little bit that it's like, oh man, if he'd been in like 3 episodes, I would have been so psyched for it. And now it was kind of like, the scene didn't make that much sense to me personally. Because yeah, it's kind of cool that Robert's sort of fucking with the Man in Black still. But what was your take on the scene?
I mean, all I'm doing, I'm just wondering if they damage their white brain chips when they do
Yeah.
that. Because like I was just talking about that last week. And plus, yeah, I guess that is a nice subversion because you bring in this kind of known guy and have him do that. But the great thing about it is that he can always just be resurrected by Dolores or what have you. So we may see him again. But I did really like the scene. It was a great Westworld scene, and I do like the Ghost in the Machine, as you said, with Ford speaking to the Man in Black. And what does he say? The game was meant for you, but you must play it alone. So yeah, I mean, it is kind of a. I mean, retcon's not the right word, but it did feel like season 1 was all like by the end it was about how it's not about you, and now they just had to they kind of had to figure out a way. I mean, we saw it with Little Ford in the first episode, that basically setting up a new narrative for the Men in Black, like it was the plan all along. But I mean, I love the Men in Black, so I'm down for it.
Yeah, no, very true. It's almost like this little last game. It can't be, I mean, it's obviously not the whole point of everything, but it's almost like Ford put it in just as a little fuck you, which makes you wonder why is the Man in Black playing it, but he does actually set out his goals in the earlier scene, which I appreciated when he talks about how he's going to go to the place of judgment, the pearly gates, or the valley beyond, or glory, whatever you want to call it. If it's all the same, who knows? They all throw around these phrases. But he's going to go there and then he's going to burn the whole thing to the ground, he says. And, I think Ford would actually be down with that, right?
I was going to say that. I was going to say that, like, what we know of the characters now at this point, it's almost like they're on the same side.
Yeah. Which is interesting. So moving on, we do have that final flashback where William meets up with naked Dolores in the past and says he can't believe that he fell in love with just a weird little thing like you, and then shows this thing that we talked about at the beginning. And then finally, we have in the present, Dolores and Teddy. And by the way, Teddy has had quite the journey. He's not super down with any of this, right? He's always like, what the fuck are we doing? What the fuck? Like all the time, right?
Yeah. And I always forget he's there. And then you see him in the background of a scene or something, or Dolores will call on him and kind of enlighten him a little bit more. And he just keeps being like, what? Also this and this? But why? Why?
Yeah, it's kind of like if you have happen to have a partner who's incredibly politically active, and you're like, oh yeah, okay, I guess we're doing this, and he's like, well, now we got to burn down the White House. Like, wait, what are we doing? But you're so hot. Ooh, what do we do? Ooh. So anyway, the place they arrive at is like a big fort, and I'm gonna assume that this is the same place that the Man in Black had to get through to go for 3 days west. So because they do say that the colonel, I think, and his men aren't going to be that happy to see him. And she says, oh, we're just going to change his mind. So
yeah. Yes. And then it's not a place, it's a weapon. I'm going to use it to destroy them. Destroy them. I'm Ultron. I need to protect people from people by destroying people.
Exactly. So that is the end of the episode. I mean, it is true. We are settling into it in a way. Feels like, as you said, we're not even in the present, quote unquote, right now. And we might not see the present for a while, right? What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, it does feel like, at least 2 episodes in, it feels like the main cusp of this season is going to be those 12 days.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I could be wrong, because I mean, that's the beauty of this show, is that then in the next episode, everything's wrapped up and we're on to the next. We're back with drowned Teddy and Bernard, and that's our journey through the rest of the show. But it could very easily be that that's what we saw at the end of the first episode. We're not going to really revisit that until 3 or 4 episodes down the line.
Yeah, I think so. And I think, we touched on it last time that whatever is happening in the present we shouldn't take it at face value. Like various theories. We've seen the brains. Probably someone's brain is going to be in someone else's body, at least at some point. Is Bernard, in quotes, Bernard? I mean, we know he's Arnold, but is he even Dolores? Who is he? And that's the sort of thing they can definitely hold as a reveal if they don't visit that timeline for a bit. Then there's time to explore these days that have gone past. Because I'm not even convinced that the people showing up there are really Delos, or they could be part of the narrative, or they could be 1 year in the future, or whatever. It's really all possible. One thing to look forward to is tigers and getting into the other worlds, hopefully, because they've basically promised that, and I will be very disappointed if it's just another tease at the end of the season, like, oh, we see one samurai. No, please, I want to see the other worlds.
Yeah, I mean, it already seems like we saw flashes of Maeve with like a samurai sword, so I assume we'll be getting there shortly.
Did we? When was that?
In the this season on Westworld after the first episode.
Oh, okay. I didn't watch that. Even, I mean, I know I should because we're all like about the theories and stuff, but I still tend to avoid trailers. But I will still dig into like behind the scenes stuff, but not necessarily that. But yeah, I'm sure you're right. Samurai Swords Aplenty will be coming up.
Yes, I'm excited. And then I guess we're gonna see Jungle World or wherever these tigers are coming from. Animal Planet.
Yeah, Georgetown. I feel like George of the Jungle over here. I think that wraps up episode 2. Do you want to throw out any predictions or questions as far as you listeners can please send in your feedback on Westworld through showswhatyouknowshow@gmail.com, and if you send us any of that, we will include it here in the show. We haven't gotten any new stuff this week, but please do send it in if you have any thoughts on what we're saying right now or after you watch the next episode. And we will be live streaming every Tuesday, 9 o'clock ish LA time. 9 o'clock Swedish time, about noon LA time.
Yes. And then
I did now also see the picture of her with a samurai sword, so I was more hyped for it before I saw this when it was just in my imagination, but I'm still hopeful they'll make it pretty cool.
Yeah, I agree. No, I mean, not much else to say. Like I said, I'm waiting for the clones. I'm waiting for that the president's a host and the launch nukes.
I mean, basically, yeah, the Man in Black wants to, burn it to the ground, literally. And he does say, even before he says that, he says, we're all soon going to be dead, making me feel like someone might nuke Westworld just to be safe from the robots, one way or another, whether that's what they want or not.
And I'm also, I guess this wouldn't really work, but I'm half waiting for the flashback of Man in Black in the real world, but everyone's treating him like a piece of shit or whatever, like he's like a nerd. But here in Westworld, he's, tough and badass.
Yeah.
So with what we know of young William, it wouldn't really wash, but I'm waiting.
Like Black Mirror style?
Yes. Yeah, exactly. But yes, please share your thoughts. And, you could find more of Jakob at awesomepedia.org, all kinds of good stuff. And also Awesomepedia on YouTube. There's a new video essay on writing fight scenes that's very entertaining. And you can find more from me at jimandthem.com and Jim and Them on YouTube.
Very good. With that, I only have one last question for you, Jim.
Oh, what's that?
Is this now?